For some more PGA DFS picks and lineup advice for DraftKings and FanDuel. This time for the RBC Heritage down there in Hilton Head. Welcome, I am Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy. And I'm joined by our PGA DFS analyst for a live Q&A. It's Niromada. Niro, happy post-Masters week. How are you?
Definitely a little Masters hangover. I think that was the most exciting weekend of golf I've ever watched. I'm admittedly older than the average age of the viewing audience, without giving away my age. So I've watched a large number of weekend golf tournaments, and I still think that's the most exciting one I've ever seen.
It
So
was truly incredible. And just to show you our dedication, the reason we're not doing this on Tuesday evening like we normally do, and we're doing it on Wednesday instead as a live Q&A, is because I just got off a flight and got back home. And I was on a flight, landed, and when I landed on Sunday, it was Rory was on the 15th or 16th tee. So it was a lot of live streaming on my phone after landing from that flight. And yes, extremely, extremely exciting. But we're on to the RBC Heritage this week. So what we'll do in this video, we'll answer your questions along the way. If you have questions, throw them here in the right side of the YouTube chat. If you're watching, say hi. We always love to hear from you. Talk about the top plays in our model for the RBC Heritage, the data-driven perspective for this tournament. Which players will be the highest owned in high stakes GPPs and smaller contests based on industry projections. And because we're doing this on a Wednesday for the first time in 2025, you, the viewer, even if you're not subscribed to OccupyFantasy.com, you'll get our list of trifecta plays. It might change a little bit by 8 or 9 p.m. Eastern, but you'll have pretty much the set list, which normally we can't say we have when we record this on Tuesdays. And finally, we'll close out the show with any weather or showdown related tips. So, Neil, let's jump right into it. RBC Heritage. Now, this is a signature event. And correct me if I'm wrong, no cut here. I know the comments generally will get on us if we get the cut scenario wrong, but I do not believe there's a cut this week. Talk about that and just briefly talk about the lineup construction. We've hit on this a couple times so far this season, but just so people know how they should be building their lineups on DraftKings this week.
yeah, so first of all, you're correct. There is no cut this week. There are a few signature events that do the Masters style cut where they go down to the low 50 in ties, even though the Masters doesn't do the ties part anymore. This is not one of them. So everyone, unless they get injured during the tournament, is going to play 4 full rounds. So number one thing is that condenses the ownership. Yeah, if you play a lot of PGA DFS, you're used to having a number of players that will be sub 5% owned, 3%, 2%, and a lot of single digit ownership. You see a lot less of that in a week like this because the field just simply doesn't have as many choices. That also means that we alter our lineup construction advice, or kind of like the frame that we're trying to push our lineups through for high risk contests. So again, let's think of the highest risk, biggest GPPs. DraftKings has a giant $3 mini max this week. So in addition to the regular giant contests out there, so we usually will tell you get yourself 2 players at 5% or below, 2 players between 5 and 15%, and then 2 players above 15% projected ownership. And that's not what we're trying to do this week. First of all, it's basically impossible to do that because there's just too much ownership in the field, again, because of the condensing of the number of players. So we're looking for, in these high risk giant contests, at least 3 players under 20% owned. Try to get at least one of those to be under 10%, and then try to have no more than one 7K golfer. The other little thing I will add in there, again, little bonus for the non-subscribers. This is one of the rare events of the year where the course really levels the playing field. So it's a very tight positional course where distance doesn't really do you a lot of good. So again, if you assume, we don't need to assume because the data proves it out, but distance is such an advantage in modern PGA. And a lot of the players in the top part of the price range are up there because they hit the ball a long way. And that advantage is negated this week. So it's definitely a good week to fire some extra shots down in the middle to lower end of the price range because, again, this course really levels the playing field.
Absolutely. And that's a great breakdown, Nero. Thank you for that. And while you were talking, I was showing here on screen our daily plug. And again, we normally don't show this. It is behind the paywall. Normally, it's not written by the time we record this on Tuesdays. But if you're not a member of OccupyFantasy.com, this is what you get every single week when Nero comes in and writes up not just his favorite plays, but he breaks down the course, talks about the weather. And then at the beginning, that showed you the lineup strategy section where, depending on the contest you're playing, you can just scroll right to that section in the plug, and it gives you a matter-of-fact construction on how to build your lineup for that specific contest. So invaluable information, Nero. Thank you for that, especially as it changes this week for a signature event. Now, let's move on to the model. The top plays in the model this week, it is data-driven, and it looks at what is necessary for a course and typically what types of metrics and characteristics have been needed for a golfer to be successful at this course. And if I bring it up now, Nero, number one in the model, unsurprisingly, is Scotty Scheffler. Number two is Colin Morikawa. Nothing really say too much about these two guys, as Scheffler is the highest priced player in the field at 13-1, Morikawa at 10-9. And I think the biggest thing here, Nero, people may look at Scheffler and say, damn, 13-1, that's pretty hefty for a price tag. But again, there's no downside in playing cheaper golfers this week because everyone makes a cut. You get 4 rounds from everyone.
Yeah, it really helps you get access to those guys at the top of the range. And again, this, as you mentioned, it's no surprise to see these two at the top of the model. That there is maybe no course on tour um, where accurate iron play matters more than this one. The greens are not only is it like claustrophobic and positional, the greens are very small, so being hyper accurate with your irons is a big advantage this week, and no surprise that we see probably the two best iron players in the game, in Scheffler and Morikawa, sitting at the top of the model.
Next, we have some cheaper guys. Michael Kim, who continues his excellent season with a made cut at the Masters last week, and then Sam Stevens, who started the season hot, finished second at Torrey Pines earlier in the year. The Farmers Insurance, and now he's back this week. He ranks number 4 in the model, Nero. So some two of the cheaper guys, and Stevens especially lower owned this week.
Yeah, it's interesting. First of all, Michael Kim, I keep waiting for him to run out of gas, but he just seemingly doesn't. So I don't know that I'd really want to fade him, but at some point I feel like he's going to break down like a car that you've driven too far. Stevens is interesting because he's a longer player, but he reminds me a lot of like Jason Kokrak, now on Live. But Kokrak was a great short course player, even though he was real long off the tee. And Stevens fits in one of our metrics about off the tee on shorter courses. He's sitting number 1 at the top of the list. He's also a decent scrambler, so I think that's why you get those two things coming together push him towards the top of the model, where you wouldn't normally otherwise think that he would fit this course.
Yeah, that's a really good comparison, and it goes to show why Nero and his extensive PGA knowledge and golf knowledge in general is valuable to this program and to Occupy Fantasy members. Next, we have Shane Lowry, and Nero. The flow chart now goes: if Shane Lowry is playing, he's in the top 5 of the model, and therefore he will finish in the top 10 of the tournament. He has yet to steer us wrong so far this season. Next is a player that you wrote up as one of your top plays in the Daily Plug this week. It's Siwoo Kim, and that's another flow chart. If it is a Pete Dye course, you play Siwoo Kim.
Yeah, you play Siwoo when it's time for Pete Dye. He's got a great record on Pete Dye courses. I think one thing people need to keep in mind, first of all, his current form is not good. So let's just get that out of the way. He's missed his last 2 cuts. He didn't play at the Masters. 38th at the Players. Before that, he had some decent finishes: 19th at Arnold Palmer, 24th Genesis, 21st at the Waste Management, 12th at Pebble Beach. So, probably not too far off of having good form. But where I was going to say is, on a week like this, finding lower ownership on good golfers is not an easy thing to do. So, if we can find a reason to play someone who has a good career ceiling like Siwoo does, and their projected ownership is single digit ish, which Siwoo is, then we want to play him. And we want, and the nice thing is, get 15% of Siwoo, 16%. You've doubled the projected ownership. You're well over the field. But if he sucks, he doesn't kill you because he's only 15% of your player pool.
Exactly. That's a really good way to look at things. And for those of you who are not in tune with golf, Pete Dye is a golf course architect. Siwoo historically has excelled at Pete Dye designed courses. So just a little more inside information for you there. Next is Xander on the list. And is he back? I know we've talked about him a couple times now on this show, Nero, over the past couple of weeks. And again, another good showing at the Masters. Feels like he's not too far off from really, really contending in a tournament.
Yeah, eighth and 12th in his last two. So eighth at the Masters, 12th at the Valspar. I mean, really on the fringes of contention at the Masters. In fact, you take out that 73 that he had to open the Masters. He was under par every day for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You're not going to find very many guys in the field that did that. He was fifth in strokes gained off the tee, 10th in total strokes gained tee to green, 12th in strokes gained approach. Putter still a little hit or miss, but 18th and 4th in his last two starts here. Definitely seems like he's getting closer to that form that he was in last year. He's getting over the injury. He's getting the reps back in. So certainly Schauffele is someone who looks on paper to be very dangerous this week.
And we're still getting a little bit of an ownership discount, it seems like. I think our latest projected ownership has him under 20%. And this isn't the 30% plus Xander we got when he won two majors last year. So this is one of those situations where, Nero, you and I talk about let's get ahead of the high ceiling young golfers before they start contending and winning. There's another situation where you can get ahead of a player who's elite returning from injury before the field ownership truly catches up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very similar principle for those people who play other DFS sports. Because in DFS, the leverage that you can get, or the positive expectation you can get, let's say, to low owned players is so high because the contests are so weighted towards those first place prizes. You almost always want to be early rather than late when good players in any discipline are making their return from injury. And Schauffele fits that bill. And it's just, someone you need to be content to lose money on maybe for a few weeks. And then the week that he hits, hopefully you're going to pay for all those losses times 1,000.
That is exactly right. To close out the top 10 of the model this week, it's two guys that Nero wrote up in the plug and an Occupy model favorite in 2025. It's Aaron Rye, it's JJ Spawn, and it's Russell Henley. And now Nero Henley burned us and most DFS players last week. But anything you want to talk about outside of what's written in the plug, outside of what we know about Spawn so far this year on Rye, Spawn, or Henley?
Well, I mean, again, three great iron players, three players who tend towards being a little bit more neat and tidy with their games than being long. And Henley just fits. He just fits from a game theory perspective. Love to come back on guys that burned a large chunk of the field the week before. And again, you look at Henley, like he just had a terrible round on Thursday. Look, terrible rounds in golf happen. He came back on Friday. He almost made the cut even. So I would say his form that was so good heading into Augusta really isn't that far off. And you're not getting he's not 5% owned, but he certainly would be 10% plus higher owned had he made the cut at the Masters and showed well. So to me, it's just an auto game theory. Take the ownership discount and hope that he's in the same form that he was in before he went to Augusta. And let's be clear that the odds would say that he is.
Very, very good point. So we got Mike in the chat. We have Jay in the chat. What's up, guys? Appreciate you stopping by. If you're watching this live, go ahead and drop a message in the chat. Say hi. Say what's up. Give us a prediction for this week. We always love to hear from you as we are live. Moose in the chat, co-founder of Occupy, says, question for Nero. PGA assessing Rangefinders this week. Does that help anyone? Does that change anything in our player selections? And so if you haven't heard, in an effort to try to speed up pace of play, I believe is the reasoning for this, Nero, that players will be allowed to use rangefinders this week on the course during the tournament.
Yep, they are. It is to speed up play. It's to make the yardage calculations from caddies, easier. I don't know that it really helps anybody. Perhaps if you have maybe it's not as much of an advantage to have like a real experienced caddy as maybe it was prior to having the rangefinder. But that difference would be really hard to quantify mathematically or even in your lineups. Yeah, I think the hope is they just play faster. But I mean, if you ask the players, they would tell you that the reason why they're going to play fast this week is because the field is smaller and they're playing
Right.
in twosomes, not threesomes. So when they play in twosomes, they play in 4 hours or less, and when they play in threesomes, they play in closer to 5 hours. And it seems really hard. The tour seems unable to change that math on the times that it takes to play.
On a related note, unrelated to DFS, but I actually saw, I think it was a TikTok or something on social media of a former caddy explaining how they use yardage books within a tournament. Now, Nero, I'm good at math, but goddamn, that's a lot of math involved on the fly. We're talking about pacing out. If anyone is interested, go check it out. I know you have some experience and you know caddies. It's crazy to use one of those yardage books over the simplicity of a rangefinder.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that most people wouldn't understand is, the yardages are marked off from various landmarks or sprinkler heads on every given hole. So first you're going to find the landmark, then you have to figure out where the flag is, and then you're trying to do the math of where the yardage goes to the middle, and then how far off of the middle is the flag itself, and then and that's before you take in into account any of the factors like the wind, elevation changes, any of that kind of stuff. So you are absolutely doing math, calculative math. I don't think that's a word, but I just made it one on the fly. And that's why you see those guys out with their pencils in those big books, like as they're standing there trying to figure out what club to hit with the player, because they're like, okay, it's this 147 off that sprinkler. I took 8 steps. That's 155 to the middle, but the flag is 9 paces off the front, not back down off the 155 into the 146. And so they're trying to figure out where do you want the ball to land and all those things. Yeah, it's a lot of math, and the rangefinder absolutely makes that easier.
I see why it takes 5 hours for players to play now, noting that.
Yep.
All right, question from Jay in the chat. Sleeper low owned golfers this week. So if we look at the large field, high risk, mass multi entry strategy section of the Daily Plug, always in the for this slate part, Nero gives us 5% or lower owned golfers, or this week roughly 5% or lower owned golfers. Nero, you wrote Siwoo Kim, Jacob Bridgman, Jaeger, Mackenzie Hughes, and Ryo Hisatsune. I know we talked about Siwoo already, but any one of those guys stand out as your favorite of the sleeper or 5% or lower owned guys?
Yeah, I mean, Hisatsune is, I think that's how you say it. I will admit, I'm not 100% sure there. He stands out. He's right around that 5%. Max Homa is an interesting one. He's not listed there, but he's also in that range. So do you believe that Max Homa is back based on his Masters appearance last week and getting in the mix and playing well? You would never get Max Homa at that price and that ownership at any point last year at all. So perhaps you can get ahead of the curve on Max Homa. Now, again, he might not be back. Might have just been a 1 week blip. My favorite one is not listed there, but was written up, and that's Brian Campbell. He's right in that 5 to 6% range. Stone Min pricing at 6K. Going to be sleeping in his own bed this week. He lives about an hour and a half away from the course, even though surprisingly he's never played it before. But he's the epitome of a short, like neat and tidy golfer. And I was really impressed with how well he played at the Masters, because that course does not fit him in the slightest. So, familiar confines, sleeping in his own bed, stone cold minimum pricing, playing a course that should really fit his game. I think he makes a lot of sense at that low ownership level.
I love that. He's also getting some betting market support. And if you watched him during the Mexico
Yes.
Open, we saw all the announcers, all they could talk about when he was in contention was he's at a disadvantage off the tee because of distance, and he was a wizard around the greens with his short game. And that's what we're looking for exactly this week. So it makes sense that you find him as a great fit for this course, despite his ownership and his price tag. Now, speaking of ownership, let's flip it and let's look at guys who we expect to be much higher owned in high dollar GPPs and smaller GPPs where pros can play. We know that there is a certain set of industry projections that influence ownership. And no matter what we have them projected for, these next group of guys will be even higher owned in those contests. Nero, who does it look like this week that sharp PGA DFS players will be playing more heavily than the field?
Yeah, I've got 6 of them on DraftKings, those same 6 actually on FanDuel, plus one more on FanDuel. So the 6 that would apply to both DraftKings and FanDuel: Scheffler, Morikawa, Aaron Rye, Nick Taylor, Lucas Glover, Russell Henley. then add Corey Connors to that list for FanDuel. So again, I think it's if you're playing at the lower stakes, just play those guys, even in the bigger contests, because at the lower stakes they're just not played enough. It's at the high stakes, if you're playing some of that, where you might want to creatively zag while everyone else is zigging on one or two of those players, and get yourself some good leverage in those smaller, higher stakes contests.
Yeah, because we've already listed a handful of guys that are natural pivots at all of these salary levels. So it just determines what type of contest you're playing. Match it up with the strategy section in the daily plug, and you can easily see which guys you want to pivot away from and how many low-owned guys you want to get away from this higher-owned list. Now, as we said at the top of the show, because every show so far in 2025 for PGA for us here on the channel has been on Tuesdays, we haven't had an official trifecta list. So if you've been a viewer but not a member of OccupyFantasy.com, you've always just gotten a little taste. You've never gotten the full list. But guess what? Because we're doing this on Wednesday, you get the full trifecta list. These are guys that where we monitor sharper sports books, 3 or 4 depending on the week. And if a golfer's odds to win have improved from the time the odds open all the way until the lines close Wednesday night, Thursday morning, and they've moved at every single book, we consider that a trifecta play. They have been historically extremely profitable and have been extremely predictive. And Nero, we have a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys already. Walk us through who's on the trifecta list for the RBC Heritage.
You're not gonna be surprised that most of these guys are standout iron players. So that's unsurprising. We've already talked about one of them. Certainly, we just talked about him a few minutes ago, and that's Xander Schauffele. So again, we pay extra attention to these trifecta moves when they are backing someone who's coming off of a break, or in Xander's case, coming back from injury and is trending in a direction. Sometimes we get the moves and we're like, yeah, but this person is like trending in the wrong direction, but they're back from injury. Sometimes it's right away that week. Sometimes it's 2 weeks later. We saw it with Hovland when he won earlier this year. So definitely pay extra attention when it's on somebody like Schauffele. So he's on there. He's the best, best theoretical player on the list. Tom Hoagie on there again, standout iron player, should be a good fit for him. Bud Cauley is on
Boy,
there. I don't know if anybody's been hotter than Bud Cauley over the last let's call it like 6 weeks on the PGA Tour. And really, if you're an Occupy member, I've written him up a few times over the last year. You know that he is just the epitome of a neat and tidy player. But yeah, so his last 3 finishes on tour: 5th, 4th, and 6th. So definitely in form, playing a course that should be a great fit for him. He's got kind of up and down finishes. He did finish 9th here once, and a couple other top 40 finishes here. So I think he can get on with the course, and it's definitely a good fit for him. And then the last 2 on the list, one's not a surprise. One probably will be Sepp Straka. Again, top 10, top 15 approach player, ball striking, near the top of the ball striking charts and off the tee. Also fits in that same Russell Henley category, where you're going to get a little bit of a discount because he missed the cut and was bad at the Masters, a pretty high ownership. And again, similar to Henley, just had one bad round. Again, fought all the way back. Actually was underneath the cut line and then somehow made a huge number on 18 on Friday, which was depressing for me personally. But anyway, so I think he would be the same one where you just like, yeah, I can write off a bad round at the Masters due to a number of factors and not change that person's overall form. And then the last one, Ryan Gerard, he was 3rd in his last start, and he's kind of a well-rounded. He's like gives you a little some Andrew Novak vibes. Like he's just top 30, top 35, top 25 in most all the metrics that matter this week. And so he could be also someone that you can get over the field on pretty easily without having to have monster exposure to him.
yeah, most of these plays are model approved as well. Ryan Gerard, we mentioned the top 10 model plays earlier. Ryan Gerard just passed that at number 11. So nice little overlap here between what the market is telling us and the sharp sports betting groups are telling us and what the model is telling us. So different angles, coming to the same conclusions is generally a pretty good recipe for a good week in PGA DFS. Let's see, we got no more questions in the chat. If you have any final questions, let's get them in here because we're going to close out the show here with any weather or showdown related notes. Nero, the wind is going to be up. This course is somewhat affected by the wind, especially the coastal holes, but it doesn't appear that there will be too much of an edge, at least for a classic contest as of the time of this live stream. But do you have any insight on whether it's for Showdown or for Classic on how the weather may play a role in our lineups?
Yeah, I mean the course is affected by the winds. It is coastal, even though most of the holes are actually down in the trees. There's only the last couple on the back nine, and maybe one of the front nine holes. Can't totally remember. Is exposed to the coast and really exposed to the winds. The forecast hasn't really changed much. It's going to be pretty consistent, blowing 10 to 15, gusting 15 to 20 Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The only little thing is, the wind does seem to be down on Thursday morning. So, maybe some of those early Thursday starters might have a small advantage, maybe for showdown players. Might be a little bit more exposed to the players that play early as opposed to the players that play late. One thing to keep in mind is it's not necessarily traditional waves like we would normally have in a big event because, again, this is a smaller condensed field. Now, the tee times are still a little spread out because they're playing twosomes, so that, it does take up a large chunk of the day to try to get them all out on the course. So I don't think I'll play it for Classic. If I'm playing Showdown, I think I would try to get myself a little bit more exposure to the early starters on Thursday. If I'm playing round one Showdown, to be clear, I try to get myself a little bit more exposure to some of those early starters on Thursday, just and hope that, again, most Thursday starters, as we've talked about before on here, they get the course at the easiest conditions anyway all week because that's when it's going to be the wettest. Because most tournaments stop watering the course once the tournament starts to let it get firmer and faster and harder as it goes along. So you get that little bump plus a little bit of bump there on the breeze might do a little bit more focus there for Showdown. But for Classic, I don't think I'm really going to play it.
All right, that's good. That is good to know. Again, we're always looking for those wave advantages in Classic, and it might not materialize this week, but again, monitor for Showdown. Even round two, round three, and especially round four can always be an advantage, even just a little bit. So, final question here is from Jay, and I was going to ask you a very similar question. So Jay and I are aligned on this final question here. Your favorite top player that will be in 50% of your lineups, not Scotty Scheffler. So we'll go ahead and say maybe your favorite player that you have the most exposure to, ideally of the higher salary variety. Before I get your answer, Nero, request to the viewers out there, make sure you subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. It is free to do so. Best way to support the channel, it's mutually beneficial. You support us, but also it lets you get notified whenever we go live, upload any new videos. We have obviously NBA, PGA, Chris is doing UFL videos, spring football. He's been crushing that content. We'll probably have some best ball content coming soon. I know some of you are itching for that. So subscribing to the channel here on YouTube is free and the best way to get notified when we post any content. Give us a thumbs up, the easiest free way to support the channel. And make sure you check out all the stuff we've shown you on screen so far at OccupyFantasy.com. Nero's picks in the daily plug, lineup strategies, our rankings and our model with projected ownership, and our lineup builder that allows you to build up to 300 lineups for DraftKings and FanDuel using our model and optimal lineup criteria. So Nero, I know you're still not done building just yet. You may not even be started, but as of now, who's that player that you're looking to get the most exposure to outside of Scotty Scheffler?
Yeah, at the top of the price range, I don't think I would have had this same answer earlier today or yesterday, but I think it's going to be Xander. As you and I have talked about, we both take the trifecta plays very seriously. And I did like what I saw from him at the Masters. And again, so let's say you just assume that Morikawa and Schauffele are roughly the same player. Xander has one more majors and one more tournaments, seemingly maybe a little bit better than Colin is. But you look at them right now, and you would say, okay, $500 more expensive, and probably going to have 5 to 10% more ownership than Schauffele. So why wouldn't I take the cheaper player at less ownership? Yes, I'm eating a little more risk, but Schauffele did actually outplay Morikawa at the Masters just last week. So I think that's where I'm going to end up. Again, as I put my disclaimer in the plug all the time, like I build a little bit later than most people, so I'm making my decisions late. That stuff shifts, and I could change by the time I get to actually finalizing my lineups. But that's where I stand today.
Really good to know. Appreciate that, Nero. And final question here from Andy. Any opinion on Akshay, who last week made the cut at the Masters, finished T42, before that missed the cut at the Valero. Any insight on Akshay this week at 7,700 on DraftKings?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's his kind of course. More so than a Bomber's Paradise. He's a little bit of a shot maker. He's creative. And he has, let's see, three top 10 finishes in his last six starts on tour. So I think that's pretty good if you like high finishes and making money. So I have no issue with him. He was 18th here last year. Three rounds in the 60s, 171 that he opened with. Seemed like he got progressively more comfortable. So I think he would be a solid play this week.
All right, thanks, Nero. And Ryan in the chat said he was also interested in Batia, so maybe a little bit of popularity coming from the YouTube viewers here on Akshay. So that's for Nero. I'm Brian. We appreciate everyone listening, as we always do. The Wednesday update and the daily plug, if you're a member of OccupyFantasy.com, we post it here in a little bit with the final trifecta plays and Nero's final thoughts on the betting market and his analysis there. So make sure you check that out. And our final ownership projection update will be probably in a couple hours. OccupyFantasy.com. So for Nero, I'm Brian. Thanks for listening. Good luck and enjoy the RBC Heritage.